Alright, hunters, it's your turn. Video's finally done. Let's take a look at your exotics, starting with Forsaken exotics. Shards of Galanor is up first, giving you super energy for every kill you get when you use Blade Barrage. Hunters have had some of the best PvE exotics in the game, and these are yet another one to add onto the list. In PvE, these are basically an unnerfed version of Orpheus rigs. They are incredibly good, allowing chaining of Blade Barrage over and over again. Blade Barrage, I would say, is better than Nova Bomb because of the flexibility of the attack. You can spread it much wider and aim it a little bit better than just a big old bomb attack, which is why Shards ended up being so good. You don't need a ton of kills to get the whole thing back, although knowing which spots will have a lot of enemies in certain activities will definitely help. In PvP, if you're good at using Blade Barrage, then you will have your super quite often, with only about 2 kills needed to get you a lot of energy. You can also just take them on and off as you get your super if you want, although that is a bit clunky. Shards of Galanor are an amazing PvE exotic and a very, very good PvP exotic. The 6th Coyote is next, where you get a second dodge ability charge. This by itself isn't the most enticing, but the things that you're able to combo with makes it more interesting. But are those things interesting and powerful enough to warrant using the 6th Coyote in the first place? Well, I guess that depends on how you play a hunter. Stack some Paragon mods and you have a lot of dodge ability uptime, which means your weapons are constantly reloaded, or your melee ability is ready to go a majority of the time. If you're a PvP Night Stalker, having a lot of smoke grenades is pretty good, as an example. The issue here is that hunters already have such strong PvE exotics already, and unless you really like having a playstyle that revolves around dodging and abilities that chain with dodging, then I'm not too sure if you'll be wearing this often. Guishin Vest buffs your spectral blades so that every blade kill you get before going stealth will restore super energy during your super. Well, what I will say is that if you're using Spectral Blades, you're going to be using this exotic. This is the Spectral Blades specific exotic. There is nothing wrong with this exotic at all. What is wrong is Spectral Blades. Right now, Spectral Blades by itself, not very good. In an update coming with Season 5, a significant amount of changes are coming to Spectral Blades. Increased melee lunge range, reduced cost of light melee attacks, and plenty more. Check the description for that full list. So if these buffs are enough to make Spectral Blades worth using, then this exotic will be worth using. Simple as that. This exotic is also sort of buggy now, where the super is lasting too long in general if you do a certain attack pattern in PvP, and then in certain PvE activities it only works sometimes. Like right now, it's really good in PvP because it is bugged. So I'm trying not to let that influence my rating. Am I using these over Shards of Galanor, Raiden Flux, Orpheus Rig in PvE? Probably not. But if I'm just looking to mess around with Spectral Blades for a little while, then yeah, I'm going to pop on the vest. Finally, Oathkeeper charges your bow faster and you can hold your bow charge indefinitely. Except that in a recent Reddit thread, it was noted that since players were not really feeling a huge difference in terms of the speed of the draw on a bow, that Bungie will just be straight up removing that part of the exotic perk, and quote, the focus of this exotic will be that players may hold bow charges indefinitely with the benefit of perfect draw being applied to arrows fired even after longer hold times, end quote. So basically now you'll get that bonus damage from a perfect shot all the time with these gloves instead of the increased draw speed. Now, I get that noticeable increased draw speed is potentially very strong, especially for PvP, but if I'm going to be using a bow and an exotic that buffs my bow capabilities, it's really gotta be worth it considering how bows are in general. Bows are fun, and they have niche situations where they are good, but at the moment, I think Oathkeeper is the weakest Forsaken exotic across all classes. They really need a good buff before I'd ever consider using them, and bows themselves aren't really the best thing in the world either. Hunters have a very high high and a pretty low low when it comes to Forsaken exotics, but did anything really change since their last tier list? Not too much. For gunslingers, the best PvE exotics are now Celestial Nighthawk and Shards of Galanor. Celestial Nighthawk is still an absolute beast for boss damage, dealing up to and over 650,000 damage in a single shot in the raid, depending on your buffs and debuffs. If you want something dead, Nighthawk will deliver. Shards of Galanor are not as proficient in boss damage, but will clear entire rooms of enemies with ease, making them fantastic for certain raid bosses, strikes, and Nightfall high scoring. In fact, I would say these might be the new best exotic for Nightfall high score runs. I will give an honorable mention to Ophidius Spathe from Warmind, giving you 2 knife charges. With the new throwing knife from Way of 1,000 Cuts enabling some rapid melee energy regeneration, Ophidia can just boost those capabilities even more, and with Brawler on, well, you can basically throw knives nonstop, and that's really fun. And it's actually not too bad either. With the other subclass blocks, though, I'm not as impressed with Ophidia. For Archstriders, considering you didn't get very much in Forsaken, if anything at all, your best PvE exotic is still Raiden Flux. It was going to be very difficult to beat Raiden Flux considering how good it is, and while it's not as much of a beast in the raid anymore, Raiden Strider supers are still insanely powerful, lasting a very long time and dealing crazy damage to all targets when fully stacked up. With Shards of Galanor entering the mix, there's been a slight decline in Archstrider usage, but Raiden Flux is still really, really, really good. For Night Stalkers, Orpheus Rig is still the champion, even with its nerf when Forsaken came out, which made it so you couldn't get a full super again when you first cast it. Don't worry too much about that, as it is still very easy to get another full super back from a single tether. If enemies run into it that weren't in the initial tether, you'll get energy from them as well. If Spectral Blades ever becomes better than an Orpheus Rig Shadow Shot, then you'll see the vest pop up. In terms of neutral exotics, I think Hunters have some of the more weaker neutral PvE exotics in the game. There isn't really anything that I would definitely recommend over the top subclass-based exotics in terms of gaining power for your character. Stompies are a movement-based exotic. I don't rate those, but some people like to use them just because of personal preference. That is fine. They are not objectively better than subclass exotics, but if they're going to make you play better, then go for it. PvP exotics have many more options for neutral exotics, but we'll start with subclass exotics first. For gunslingers, the best PvP exotic is Shards of Galanor due to its potential to get you tons of supers. In an average game of quick play, you could see an extra 2 to 3 supers per match, and even though it's clunky, you can just take these off after every super and swap to them when you have one. In competitive play, these can literally swing entire matches if you get enough kills because you will have so many supers and can snowball. Your other gunslinger options are Ophidia's for double knives, which isn't too shabby, or Young Ahamkara's Spine, which has a potent effect, but it's just not quite strong enough to use all of the time. For Archstriders, Raiden Flux is very strong for your super, and you should probably be switching to it whenever you have your super to take advantage of it. But I wouldn't wear it the entire game, which leaves Lucky Raspberry versus Shinobu's Vow. Lucky Raspberry is going to be pretty inconsistent as a whole, but double arc bolt grenades can be devastating, more so in competitive play than in quick play. Shinobu's is going to give a much more consistent experience, but skip grenades are a bit harder to use than arc bolts. For Night Stalkers, you got Vest and you got Orpheus Rigs. If you're on Spectral Blades, you're going to use Vest. If you're not, you're on Orpheus Rig. Pretty self-explanatory there. I think Spectral Blades with a Vest is a little more popular than Shadow Shot with Orpheus Rigs. Now we move to our neutral exotics. Foe Tracer, Wormhusk, Dragon's Shadow, Sixth Coyote, Gemini Jester, Stompies. A lot of good stuff out there. Wall hacks, health regen, weapon ready and reload, dodge charges, radar removal, increased movement capabilities. I don't think I could outright say any one of these things is better than the other because it is so playstyle dependent. For me, I like wall hack capabilities over dodge-based boosts because I'm a Titan main and I just don't use my Hunter dodges at all because I just don't have the muscle memory. That being said, I think for the average Hunter main, you're probably going to get the most value, assuming you actually use your dodge a lot, out of Dragon's Shadow or Worm Husk. Dragon's Shadow auto-reloading everything means you can get your melee back on dodge, and having increased movement speed and weapon ready speed is really strong for PvP, and the uptime on it is very high. Worm Husk, giving a chunk of health on dodge, means more uptime. It means you can re-enter an engagement faster than other players would normally be able to, giving you an advantage. Worm Husk was amazing pre-nerf. It's still pretty good post-nerf, but not overwhelmingly so where it feels like you have to use it no matter what because it's so good. Of course, Stompies are a fan favorite, but again, I do not like to rate movement exotics, although I will say that I believe Stompies are probably the most popular pick at this time because none of the other neutrals give an overwhelming advantage that make them a must equip. I think switching Stompies and Shards of Galanor is what a lot of people would consider to be the best or most optimal use of exotics in PvP at this time. Gemini Jester, I feel like on paper looked really amazing and just didn't quite make the huge waves everyone thought it was going to. Now that competitive has the radar back though, these are good again, still very annoying to fight against. Average players, I feel, still struggle against these, but upper tier players probably don't need them to get kills. Then we have the rest. Exotics, not mentioned at all. Graviton Forfeit, a Destiny 1 darling, increases the duration of invisibility effects and gives you faster melee recharge when invisible. Only recently did we get any sort of invis effects that felt like they were worth using, but if you're running Spectral Blades, you're probably using Vest. Non-Spectral Blade invisibility effects are fine at best, but there aren't enough really good invis effects to really have to worry about Graviton. Knucklehead Radar gives you the radar when aiming down sights with all weapons. Again, a case of it not being bad, but just other things being better. Knucklehead is good for newer PvP players, maybe still learning the game or the maps, but more knowledgeable players don't really have too much of a need for this. Aeon Swift, I think we've talked about the Aeon series enough to know that you can very easily pass on these. Mechaneer's Trick Sleeves are the sidearm god exotic. They boost sidearm ready and reload speed and increase sidearm damage when you swap to one when you don't have any shields. The effect on these gloves is very strong. The problem is that no one is really using sidearms that much because they're just not very important right now. Sidearms are already pretty fast in general, and using this exotic if you only have one sidearm feels like a waste sometimes, even if you can surprise people every now and then. Sealed Ahamkara Grasps in Destiny 1 used to give an extra melee charge. Now, their perk is dealing melee damage, reloads your weapon. It's a decent effect, but honestly, it feels like Bungie could make the Grave Robber perk this strong, and it would have almost no impact on the game anyway. Frosties give energy while sprinting, and dodging increases sprint speed. When I first saw these, I thought they were going to be really strong, but alas, it's just not strong enough for PvE compared to subclass exotics, although it is a bit stronger in PvP. Finally, Lucky Pants boost your hand cannon capabilities by loading bullets into your stowed hand cannon on precision hits, and hand cannons ready really quickly and are super accurate immediately after swapping. In PvE, it's not really that important at all, but in PvP, it has a very niche effect similar to Mechaneer's Trick Sleeves of trying to finish off weak opponents hit by a body shot sniper or a shotgun hit. That is the only time I imagine you would use these. You really need to play around that strength to maximize their use. That is your Hunter exotic tier list. Tier lists are done, hooray. But like I try to do with new content drops, I will update these lists with new exotics as they are released, or if there ends up being a large swing of power for certain existing exotics. If you enjoyed this video, a positive rating would be great. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.